Say goodbye to the FDIC. It was good while it lasted, baby. It was nice doing business with you. Man, I am absolutely just awed at what is happening these last couple of days. It's let's dive into it. So here's the FDIC. The FDIC, the assessment base has always been more than just insured deposits. A bank's assessment base was equal to its total domestic deposits. All right. The FDIC, the Deposit Insurance Fund, is funded mainly through quarterly assessments on insured banks. A bank's assessment is calculated by multiplying its assessment rate by its assessment base. A bank's assessment base and assessment rate are determined and paid each quarter. All right. So generally speaking, let's see, they show assessment rates for both large and small banks are subject to adjustment. Assessments decrease for the issuance of long-term unsecured debt. Assessment rates decrease for the issuance of long-term unsecured debt. They increase for holdings of long-term unsecured and subordinated debt issued by other insured funds. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There is not enough money in the FDIC to cover your deposit. It's freaking insanity. Every bank pays an assessment into the FDIC to be part of the FDIC charter, if you will. They pay a fee. So the FDIC, in theory, will go out there and say, hey, bank, you're more at risk than that bank. We're going to charge you a higher fee. It's kind of like a credit rating, essentially. But the problem is there isn't enough money. The fractional reserve, it's inherently impossible for the FDIC to cover all the deposits. It can't happen. So now we come and look, what do we find? We find the FDIC is now effectively insuring all bank deposits for all depositors, no matter how much money they have in their accounts. The statement by the regulators was issued to announce a new emergency program to protect depositors of failing banks. They explained that they would make a systemic risk exception for both Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank. I just chuckled at Signature Bank because look right here. As required by the Dodd-Frank Act, however, the FDIC amended its regulations effective April 2011. Who is on the board of Signature Bank? Anyone want to take a wild flip and guess? It's Barney Frank from the Dodd-Frank Act. So both Signature and Silicon Valley Bank, a tech and startup focused lender that was shut down following the bank run. SFB depositors will have access to all their money. All their money. Oprah and her millions of dollars. The Megan and whatever that guy's name and those people, millions of dollars. All these clowns who put their money in Silicon Valley Bank, knowing full well the FDIC limits were $250,000 per account, and they still did it, and we're going to pay them all. Who's we? The FDIC. You think the FDIC's got enough in there to cover that? No. Give me a flipping break. It's inherently impossible. FDIC is like PBGC. It is not well capitalized. It's just not. Let me give an example. I remember when I was a broker back in the aughts, we used to have these brokered CDs. You know, a lot of people got nervous after 2001 and 2001, 2002. And so they wanted CDs. You're like, all right, well, we get a CD, and you just shop around CDs, and you say, oh, I got this Bank of Puerto Rico, paying, we'll just say 6%. A bank of, First Citizens Bank, pretty conservative, well-capitalized bank, is paying 5%. Both FDIC covered, mind you. In theory, the Bank of Puerto Rico would have to pay a lot more in assessment rates to the FDIC because they're less well-capitalized and more of a risk. Yeah, they might be paying a little bit more, but if you think it's enough to cover the risk, you're freaking nuts. So, of course, people are going to invest in the Bank of Puerto Rico because they're backstopped by the FDIC. The FDIC said, we will guarantee the Bank of Puerto Rican debt up to this $100,000 back then. Again, you could, have joint accounts, you got TODs or PODs to increase your FDIC coverage. But still, at the end of the day, anything above that, we'll say $500,000, because per account, per title, you're on your own. There's a risk to you. All right, we're First Citizens Bank, well capitalized, very conservative lender, very conservative bank. There's less risk to you, and yet you didn't get as much interest because they were a conservative bank. So by being part of the FDIC, First Citizens Bank was essentially bankrolling Bank of Puerto Rico. All right. So no one's going to buy a First Citizens Bank CD when they can buy a Bank of Puerto Rico if it's FDIC. When I say no one, I'm being facetious, but you know what I'm saying. So the Bank of Puerto Rico is being bankrolled by First Citizens Bank and all the other conservative banks out there. Almost like literally identical to the EU. We have Germany and we have Greece, for example. Germany is a well-capitalized, well-capitalized conservative country. You see what I'm saying? When Greece joins the EU, inherently Greece takes on the risk of Germany. Well, Germany's risk is a very established economy. Conservative is now bankrolling that of Greece. So Greece with its corruption, Greece with its just insane spending, basically is being subsidized by Germany. And that can last for a while. It can last for a while. But when Greece doesn't clean up its act, Germany's on the hook. The taxpayers of Germany are on the hook for the liberal and the Greece economy, the liberal spending. The FDIC bank assessments, if it were even covered the whole thing, which it inherently can't with fractional reserve, the First Citizens banks of the world are on the hook to cover the Bank of Puerto Rico. Again, this can last as long as the bank rolling is at a certain level low ability to cover. First says, yeah, I'll bite that. I'll pay a fee just to be part of FDIC to keep the banking system intact. But I'm not going to be on the hook for everything Bank of Puerto Rico does. No, you're on the hook for $100,000. Now it's $250. Now it's for everything. Everything. So who is ultimately on the hook to bail out Oprah? It's us, the taxpayer. We're bailing out Oprah. We're bailing out Meghan and Harry, whatever the hell their name is. We're bailing out all the woke freaking clowns who invested with SVB, had $10 million on deposits there, knowing full well none of it other than $250 was FDIC covered. SVB wasn't paying a huge premium to cover those debts. A deposit at a bank is a liability to the bank, by the way. Just remember that. If I deposit $100,000 at Navy Federal Credit Union, it's a liability to Navy Federal. They are liable to me. I have an asset on them. They have a liability to me. Do you think the FDIC looked at Silicon Valley Bank and said, we're going to raise your assessment because of all these risks? Hell no. Maybe a little bit. Not nearly enough to cover it. Not nearly enough to cover it. So who's covering it? Oh, the FDIC. Where? How are they covering it? The backstop is now the taxpayer with unlimited printing machine. Remember, SVB had what, 150 billion in deposits? That's liabilities. How much did we send to Ukraine? 100 billion? Now we're going to have another 100 billion or whatever it is to backstop freaking SVB? And you think it's going to stop there? Where's this money coming from? It's not there, dude. It's not there. All these people want to grab, Joe Biden's budget is breaking the bank. Dude, the bank has been broken for years. It's been broken for years. There isn't the money to cover this stuff. And so what happens now is effectively when you start covering everything, it's like racism. If everything is racism, there's nothing racist. If everything is covered by the FDIC, there is nothing being covered. It's inherently can't. Because there isn't a backstop. This is freaking insanity. The deposit guarantee was raised to $250 in 2008. The new emergency program is really not new, as despite the initial responsible statements by Yellen, the Federal Reserve plans to implement the no-limit program been in place since at least 2020. It's also unclear what additional protections and safeguards are being considered. Another source tied to the U.S. banking sector is said to expect a drastic increase designed to calm any run on banks. Now their protection level has been made de facto limitless, which means there is no protection. If everything is racist, there's no racism. If everything is protected, there is no protection. Which means and this is what I could not agree more. The next series of failures will threaten the collapse of the entire system, 100%. This is the fundamental problem with centralization as it removes the protective limits of decentralization. Actually, I'd say risk control. If everything is covered, nothing is covered. That means that you're basically saying to your drunken freaking brother who's a crackhead, here's a credit card, just go crazy. We will cover your debt unlimited. There is no incentive to be conservative other than your own moral code. It's freaking nuts, dude. There's a fundamental problem with centralization. It removes the protective limits of decentralization in a foolish and inevitably futile attempt to avoid the consequences of limited failure. This is exactly what happened in 2008. You have to let the clowns, the Greases of the world, go bankrupt. Yeah, it's going to be painful. This is what happened. This is why we avoided a Great Depression under Calvin Coolidge, by the way, 1920, 21. You've got to let the clown work fail. You cannot it is going to be painful. The problem is political is always 2 years. We're always on a 2-year political cycle, and no one wants to be the guy in charge when the banks fail. You've got to let them fail, dude. You got to clean out the bad. It's like a controlled burn. Everyone's like, oh, forest fires are bad. No, forest fires are good. They get rid of the dead, and they regenerate the growth. Forest fires not even control, it doesn't have to be. It could be anything, but forest fires are good. It burns the dead wood and allows the other growth to come, and the other growth comes even stronger. That's why you prune your fruit trees. All right, so let's see, so by avoiding the consequence of a limited failure, combine this increased centralization with a $620 billion in unrealized losses that the U.S. banks had not yet accounted for at the end of 2022. The fact that the current zero reserve banking system is a literal Ponzi scheme, with the Fed desperately trying to make depositors whole each time a bank can't keep up with its outstanding loans, and systemic failure is inevitable. What is that? I don't know what to do. I mean, I look at my money and I'm like, I tell you, I mean, I'm pretty conservative right now, but it's like, dude, this is freaking scary. Because if everything is covered, nothing's covered. You see what I'm saying? Does that mean I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know what to do. I mean, that doesn't mean I don't know. I mean, the whole economy, could banks get run on left and right? It could. I don't know. What are the futures doing today? Let's take a look here. Hold on there, Stone Pablo. Let's see what the futures. The last I checked, they were down 300. The Dow was down 300 points in the futures. Now they're only down 200, as giving up earlier gains as bank shares slide. I tell you, man. I mean, look, at the end of the day, buying some banks at your local bank, some CDs at your local bank, you're probably gonna be okay. You're probably gonna be okay. If the way I see it though, if I got some debt over here and I got some liquidity over here, take that liquidity to pay off that debt, man, and hopefully I get some more liquidity on the back end. I mean, what else are you gonna do? I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. I wish I did. And we could just be friggin', whistling at the graveyard. We could be tilting at windmills, all those things we say in the vernacular, or we could just be a passing issue. I don't know. But if FDIC is covering everything, it's covering nothing. That's all there's to it. All right, love your thoughts. We'll see you